So now I'm going to continue with our Packer template creation process. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to show you a file that we also need to add into our image. Now, what we're doing is we're going to be using Docker to basically run our application. So we're going to run an API inside a Docker container, and we're going to install Docker, and we've done it already with a setup script that installs Docker for us. Then we're going to pull down our Docker container image. Now, what we want to do is we want to also be able to see any logs that are coming from inside the container. So at this moment in time, we can't really see that because everything is running inside a container. So what we want to do is we want to send all of the logs from the container to the AWS CloudWatch service. So I've already been there. So what you can do is you can search for that from the services here, or if you've been there already, you can just click on the AWS CloudWatch service. Now, the way in which this works when it loads the page is that you need to create a group. So if you go to the logs group here on the left hand side here, so at the time of this recording, that's where it is, but generally it's going to be a log group. I already have a logs or a log groups or a group created already that's going to basically be a recipient of all of the logs that are coming from a Docker container. So this is really important because what we want to do is we want to send these logs to AWS CloudWatch, and then the Docker logs group will then be able to collect the logs, and then we can inspect these logs inside of here and see if there's any errors, if we need to debug anything, or if we need to do anything that requires us to actually look at the logs that are coming from our application. So with that out of the way, what I'd like to do now is to show you that file. So like we did previously with the setup, when we install Docker, we're going to add a new file. So if you go to the terminal, I'm just going to clear the screen, and I'm going to do touch, and I'm going to call it daemon.json. So it's going to be a simple JSON file that's going to basically include the log group and the region that we want to send the log to. So I'm just going to create that file here. And if you go back to our code editor here, so we should have daemon.json. So it's right at the top here. And what we're going to do here is I'm simply going to paste in a simple JSON config here. So it's really straightforward. And again, obviously all the resources, all the commands and everything I'm going to provide along with each video. So you don't need to worry about that. So we've got the log driver here. So we're basically specifying the AWS logs, and we're specifying the region we want to send the logs to and the log group in itself that we're using. So if you go back to the console here, so I'm inside the Ohio or US East 2 region. So it's something that you need to make a note of. So you need to make sure that the region you're sending the logs to and the region where you've created the log group both match up. So if, for example, if you're in US East West or US West 1 and you're trying to send your logs from, or you're trying to send your logs to US East 2, then obviously there's going to be a mismatch and that's not going to work. So it's really important that the region you specify or you create the log group is the same one that you're sending it to in the daemon.json file. So I'm just going to save that out, and then we're going to go back into the image template that we've been doing previously. And now what we want to do is we want to add a provisioner that's now going to add the daemon.json file, and then it's going to move that file into the right location. So let's add that now. So what we're first going to do is we're going to make some space under the previous provisioner. So we're going to add another provisioner here, and this provisioner is going to be a file provisioner. So we're going to add this file provisioner. So again, we're going to use the provisioner keyword, but this time it's going to be a file provisioner. And then we're going to add the source for it. So what we're saying here is the source is going to be inside this directory, and it's going to be daemon.json file. So that needs to match up exactly as we have it. So we've got daemon.json and daemon.json. So the exact same way we did with the setup file there. And then we're going to specify a temporary location. So we're going to do this in 2 steps, or we're going to do using 2 provisioners. So the first provisioner is going to be a file provisioner that we can use to tell Packer to take a file from our local directory and then put that in a temporary file. Now, the next step is going to be to add another provisioner that's then going to move that to the right location. So let's have a look at that now. So what we're saying now is we're going to want the shell provisioner, and then we're going to use a move.json script here. So the move.json script here is simply going to move the file from the temporary location into the correct place that we want it to. at this moment in time, we don't have a move daemon bash file. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that as well. So I'm going to do touch, and we're going to call it move daemon.sh. So it's going to be a bash file. And again, so this needs to match up exactly as we have it there. So move-daemon.sh. So inside of here, all we're going to do is we're simply going to move that file into the right place. So we're simply going to stick in here a simple move. So we're basically using the sudo, and we're moving the file inside temp daemon.json, and we're going to move it to the correct location where Docker expects the file to be. So that's going to be in the etc docker/daemon.json file there. So I'm going to save that out, and let's go back to our script here, and let's just get rid of that space for now. So now what we have is two provisioners. That's first going to be a file provisioner that's going to take a local file that we have in our directory, and it's going to put it in a temporary location, and then we're going to move that file, that same file, and we're going to put it in the correct place. And for that, we're using another script, which is going to be move-daemon.sh, and that's going to simply move it from the temporary location to the right location where Docker expects it to be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the final provisioner in the build step. So at this moment in time, what we have is three provisioners. So we've got the shell provisioner for setting up Docker. We've got a file provisioner for taking the local file from our local directory. And then we've got another shell provisioner that's going to move the daemon.json file to the right place. Now what we want to do is we want to add a public SSH key that we created previously to the image itself. So if you remember, we created an SSH key pair, so a private key and a public key. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the public key, and we're going to basically put that into the image itself. So I'm just going to create a bit of space here first. And after the shell for moving the file to the right place, we're going to add that in here. So I'm simply going to paste that in here just to save some time. So what we have is a file provisioner. So we're using two file provisioners and two shell provisioners. So you can use as many provisioners as you need to really customize your image here. So we're basically saying the source is going to be from this directory, and it's going to be the public key. So it's really important that you get this correct. So it's going to be the .pub, and we're basically going to move that into the temporary location. So we don't really mind the location for the public key, so we can keep it in a temporary file. So we don't really need to move that to any other particular place, because we're still going to be able to log in using the SSH key when we launch the EC2 instance with this image that we're building here. So I'm just going to save that out for now. And at this moment in time, we're actually ready to build our image. So we have the source block and we have the build block. So what we're going to do in the next steps is we're going to add the authentication that Packer needs to authenticate on our behalf, so they can connect to AWS. And we're also going to pass the required variables, so the required environment variables, in particular the Docker username and the Docker password. And we're going to be doing that in the next steps.